Hello everyone, I'm George from Ireland. I'm speaking to you from London, and behind me, that house with the blue plaque, that is the house that Dr. Ambedkar lived in from 1921 to 22. You can see the blue plaque above where I'm pointing. So Dr. Ambedkar is best known for being the principal author of the Indian Constitution. So Dr. Ambedkar was a real Renaissance man whose attainments spanned many fields of scholarship. And his accomplishments are too much to be summarized in a brief video. So he was a man of the most exceptional gifts in several fields. He was born in 1881 in India, in what's now Madhya Pradesh, as in that central state, and in a village called Mao, well, a town called Mao, in the cantonment, which is to say the army base. His father was an army officer. Now, he was born into a Hindu family. There are 4 castes in Hinduism, all subdivided. Each caste is subdivided into other groups, and below them the Harijans, or the scheduled castes as we call them now. Back then they're often known as Dalits or untouchables. So unfortunately India had been bedeviled by caste discrimination for centuries, and he suffered from this. So his father was an army officer. It was highly unusual for someone who was a Dalit to be made an army officer, and his family had been in service of the British Raj for generations, first of all in the army of John Company, and latterly the Indian Army, i.e. the pro-British military force in India. So the literacy rate in India was under 20% at the time. For Dalits it was much lower than that. So it was extraordinary what he achieved in education. He was the youngest of 14 children. So there wasn't much money to go around the house. They went to school, and there he suffered severe discrimination, but he was lucky to get to go to school at all, because unfortunately most children in India didn't get to go to school for a long time after that. And he felt demeaned a lot. There were all these efforts to belittle him. He and the other Dalit children were not even allowed to sit inside the school building, had to be outside in the broiling sun. And No Peon, No Water is a tract that he wrote about that very memorably, saying that the Dalits were not allowed to pour water themselves. They had to get to one of the school janitors to do it, had to be poured from a great height, and they couldn't touch any drinking vessels or any utensils that the other pupils were going to eat or drink from. So it was a sort of petty discrimination to humiliate them, to make them feel worthless. So it was dreadful. There was the most appalling caste bigotry. I'm not suggesting that most upper caste Hindus agreed with that at that time, but I'm sorry to say that quite a few did, and Gandhi said that. Even Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi said the racialism of the Britishers is actually mild compared to the bigotry of certain Hindus towards these scheduled castes. Anyway, he overcame these many obstacles which most would have found insuperable in his situation, and he was an extraordinarily bright child. He set about his studies with a military level of mission, and with military level of discipline, and an extraordinary sense of mission and perhaps of destiny. So he won many scholarships. He later studied at Elphinstone College in Bombay, or Mumbai, as it's been since 1998. Elphinstone College, of course, takes its name from that the erstwhile governor of Bombay province in the mid-19th century, Mount Stuart Elphinstone. He was later ennobled for his service in India, and indeed I knew his descendant. He was at school with me, the current Lord Elphinstone, or Elphinstone, as some people pronounce it, Elf, as he was known to us affectionately as. Anyhow, so that was an affiliate of Bombay University. So when he passed his 4th standard in English, this was greeted with acclamation in his community, because very few of the scheduled castes had accomplished this most considerable feat. Anyway, so he won a scholarship from the Gaikwad of Baroda, because remember there were 585 princely states in India at the time, and they had a wide degree of autonomy. So about a third of the land and about a quarter of the population of India were part of these princely states. The remainder was part of British India under direct British superintendence. Anyhow, so then he got married at the age of 15 to a 9-year-old, which was not uncommon in India at the time. Having said this, it was more like a betrothal, because they didn't actually live together as man and wife, and he didn't consummate the marriage until it was healthy for his wife to do so. He had only one child with her, Yashwant, She died in 1935, his first wife, and then he got married again. But that's another story. So he sailed to the United States, and he studied at Columbia University, which is in New Jersey, where he shared rooms with a fellow Indian who was Zoroastrian, and they remained firm friends for the rest of their born days. So he was awarded a master's degree from there, subsequently a doctorate in economics. So he really was an academic supernova. And he continued his stellar academic career here in the United Kingdom. He attended the London School of Economics, which had been founded by Beatrice and Sidney Webb not so many years before, and had a superb reputation in the subcontinent. Later, Feroz Gandhi was to study there, as in the husband of Indira Gandhi. And to this day, it's got quite a few students of South Asian extraction. Anyway, so he was reading for the bar at Gray's Inn at the same time as writing his doctoral thesis in economics. He sailed back to India in 1917, and the ship that was carrying his books was sent to Davy Jones's locker by a German U-boat. So that put paid to a lot of his studies. He had to be given an emergency extension, but he was later awarded his degree when he successfully defended his doctoral thesis before the board. So here was a man who had 6 degrees, 2 of which were doctorates. That's in addition to qualifying as a barrister in England and Wales, and that qualification was recognised in India, so he could be called to the bar there without any more ado. And he practiced law in Bombay. So the non-cooperation movement was started just after the First World War, and he was broadly sympathetic to nationalism. He wasn't pushing for independence with any urgency. He certainly didn't want to use force against the British Empire. He was a reformer. He preferred to work within the system, and he was never a member of the Congress Party. He was part of the Republican Party of India, various other organisations, the Scheduled Caste Federation, and so forth, but not actually Congress. So he was elected to the legislature of Bombay State, as then was, which is not just what we now call Maharashtra, was much larger, extended much further north and west of there into what's now Gujarat, or even into parts of Pakistan, like Sindh, what's now Pakistan. And he was unusual for someone from a Hindu background for saying he would accept Pakistan. Almost from 1940, the Lahore Declaration. He was almost unique in saying, yeah, we should give them what they want, and we should be willing to divide Punjab and Bengal. Now, he didn't come from those areas of India, so he wasn't particularly sentimental about them, because if you're a Bengali or a Punjabi, you might well not want to see what Gandhi would say was the vivisection of these provinces. And he thought that the far greater evil was the division of society, not the division of land, was certain higher caste people feeling the most withering disdain and hatred for the lower castes. And of course, some of that odium was returned by the downtrodden castes. Anyway, so he was on various vice-regal committees from 1942, no Quit India movement for him, and there's so much concentration on the Quit India movement and non-cooperation during the Second World War. People overlook the fact that most people carried on cooperating with the British Raj. Moreover, there was a vigorous campaign in opposition to non-cooperation. Take the Hindu Mahasabha said, let every man stay in his post. Every railwayman, every government servant, every police officer, every soldier, and so forth. And of course, most of them did. So this is often played up how effective it was. That yes, it was a headache for the British Raj. But the British Raj wasn't close to collapse even during the Quit India movement. Obviously, the Japanese invasion was a more serious peril to the British Raj. Anyway, so the war ended, and by then the Cripps mission had been and gone, and London had vowed that as soon as practicable, after the defeat of the war, independence would be granted. They thought within 3 years of Japanese surrender. Then they penciled in June 1948, slightly bringing it forward. As we know, it happened on the 15th of August 1947. I don't propose to recount the well-known tale here. But so he held various government posts. He was a first Minister of Justice in independent India, and he latterly drafted the Indian constitution. So that's him. So he was disappointed that traditionalist Hindu religious leaders were not amenable to his campaign for equity for the scheduled castes, and they were not to be known by the opprobrious name of Dalit, but to be known as the scheduled castes, to have positive discrimination, that to be affirmative action to lift them up because of the multi-generational severe discrimination that they had suffered. obviously, there's been great success on this, but the battle is not entirely won. He married again just after the Second World War. I don't think he had any children with his second wife. So he was so disheartened that mainstream Hinduism was not hearkening to his campaign for justice that he decided to become a Hindu. Especially it was in 1956 when his diabetes was exacerbating. So as he felt himself debilitating, he knew that the end was nigh. Incidentally, if you see through the window, I'm not sure if it's clear to you, I can see it with the naked eye, there's a bust of him at the back, and it's wreathed in a garland near the rear window. There's a large a garden behind it. Anyway, he died in 1956. He was cremated in a Buddhist ceremony. So he's one of the most rightly celebrated Indian leaders of the mid-20th century, and his hometown is now named in his honor. So many things now bear his name. His likeness has appeared on the postage stamps of India. So I hope you found this video a little bit informative. So kindly subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, Jai Hind.